Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my review of the Winternight Trilogy by Katherine Arden. I absolutely adored this wonderful series that starts with The Bear and the Nightingale first, continues on with The Girl in the Tower. Hope you're noticing how beautiful these books are. And finally concludes with The Winter of the Witch to be the end of this trilogy. And so I absolutely loved these books, like I just said, and I have a lot to say about them, so I decided to do this dedicated review, and I hope that you enjoy it. My goal is going to be to keep most of this spoiler-free, but if I do go into spoilers, I'm going to clearly mark where I do that, so you don't have to worry about listening to any of them, and that will be time-stamped and clearly marked. So I'm just going to get into it, and I'm very excited to talk about this series. First of all, the overall thoughts to get out of the way is that this is definitely going to be pretty much a rave review, even if I reflect on some of my thoughts and they don't all sound positive. I did give every book in this series 5 stars individually, and they do such a good job of fitting together while each book is different from one another. So they do a good job of keeping things fresh, and there are new developments in each book, and the progression just feels very natural from the start of the series to the end of it, and I loved what Katherine Arden did with that. So the first thing that I want to talk about, because I think that I have the least to say about it, is her prose. And I've recently heard the term window pane prose, which I doubt is a new term, but I hadn't come across it before. And I think that the intention of window pane prose is meant to be that the prose itself does not draw attention to itself. It is meant to fade into the background so that you can just read and experience the story without really noticing it. And I thought of the Winternight Trilogy when I read this term, because I'm not sure if what Katherine Arden does would exactly be considered window pane prose, because it's not that I don't notice it, but she does do a great job of just having simple prose that serves the story, and I think worked really well with the story that she was trying to tell, but it also does sort of fade into the background in a way because it is so easy to read. And I found myself just, even though these books aren't super long, just being able to read them really, really fast, and being able to read 100 pages without really realizing that I had read 100 pages, for example. So while I think that that is a huge positive, I do think that she is also good at having some beautiful word choices that I did notice. So it's not that I think that her prose just totally fades into the background and you don't notice it at all, because I think that her prose is good and definitely a positive for this story. It's just that it does make the books really easy to read, which is great. Next up, I want to talk about world building and magic. So overall, I find the world in this series to be very fairy tale-esque, and I have said this before, but I think that there are a couple of things that combine to make it feel like that, and one of them is that it is very atmospheric, and you're really able to sink into the world and to feel how the characters feel, and a lot of the times that is to feel very cold and to experience this winter atmosphere with them, and it's very vivid in that sense, so you really feel like you're able to sink into it. And the other reason that I think that this feels like a fairy tale is just that 1300s Russia feels whimsical and magical to me, and is a great historical fantasy setting because it's a very unfamiliar setting to me. And there are a lot of things about it that do feel fantastical and sort of like a fairy tale, and I'm really glad that we got to explore multiple locations in this world, along with the Coyote. I looked up how to pronounce it, and I'm pretty sure it's Coyote. But they very much feel like a fairy tale and like folklore, and I know that they are Russian folklore, and I love that that is the style that she decided to go with. And I also love the idea of these pagan religions against this New World Christianity religion. because that feels very like real and grounded in things that would have happened in the past, because obviously there have been a lot of wars over religion. And I liked that the physical setting of the books made it feel very grounded, and the things that we got to experience, like the forest towns and the monasteries and the cities that we got to see throughout the course of this series, they felt very like down to earth. So it made what was happening around them in the setting with the magic feel even more whimsical. And the other world building thing, I don't even know if this counts as world building because this is like a real thing, but the name modifiers that I really liked learning about the Russian name modifiers, because even though that's a real convention, it very much feels like something that you would find in a fantasy setting. So I think that it really added to and elevated that feeling in this series. And then the final thing about the world building and the magic that I won't really go into because of spoilers is the fact of the suggestion of other realms. And that's all that I'll say, but I really enjoyed that and the exploration that we got to see of a little bit of that. Next up, I want to talk about characters, and some of these I am not really going to name them and not going to talk about them because I don't want to spoil them. But first and foremost, and the main character of this series who really ties the whole thing together and kind of like puts the series on her back is, of course, Vazia. Vazia grows so much over the course of the series, and it's honestly wonderful to watch. She has so much emotional strength to like stay with her course of action whenever she decides something. She has the courage to stand up for what she wants, even in the face of danger and even when she feels frightened, and she is very headstrong, but she's always doing what she genuinely thinks is right. So even when sacrifices need to be made, she will try to avoid them and avoid like emotional pain, but she has the courage to do what she believes is right, and I love that about her. I also love that she has faith in the Kjerti that only she can see, but she does have faith in them and she always treats them well, and despite the things that people try to tell her, she has faith in herself and in the fact that she is sane and that she is like taking the right course of action that she believes in. And I think overall, I just love that even when she endures hardships, she is so good at still carrying on and just doing her best throughout the whole series. And like I said before, she just grows so much, and I just genuinely feel proud of Vazia throughout this series. Next up, I want to talk about Constantine, and he is an interesting one. And I think that he is sort of the definition of a character that even if they're not a good person, you can't help but sort of feel for them anyway, because despite his decisions, I couldn't help but feel pity for him. So I think that the writing of his character was very complex in that way, because even though I didn't like him, I still found him very compelling. So I liked to follow him. And I liked the exploration of corruption with him, and I also liked that he was sort of a benchmark, or like the representation of the theme that back in those days, and for a long time afterwards, I'm sure, the status of religion, or like a person's piety and whether they were religious, was sort of used as a benchmark for whether they were good or evil, and if they were perceived to stray even a little bit from this accepted path of religion, then they could just be considered as like a lost soul or an evil person. And so that has always been really interesting, and I think that we got a really great exploration of that. And then next up, I kind of just want to talk about the Petrovich family in general, because with the exception of Sasha, they kind of represent the like life courses that are proper for young men and women of this era. And Sasha doesn't stray completely from it, but he doesn't really follow it either with his desire to become a priest. And so I think that helps him understand Vazia a little bit more. But her whole family is sort of a foil for her in that sense. because I really like how they kind of struggle to love her even though they're worried and scared for her soul in just like who she is as a person and the life course that she wants to pursue, like not wanting to get married as a young woman, but also not wanting to go to a nunnery, because those were literally the only two options for a young woman. And when Vazia doesn't want to do that, everyone's like, oh my gosh, you are like, your soul is damned. So I like that it was a little bit more nuanced with her family. It's very obvious that they care for one another, and this theme of like religion and going the proper way in your life is represented well, because they aren't just like writing her off. Like, they are very obviously struggling to care for Vazia because they do care for her, and so I really enjoyed watching that play out throughout these books. So in terms of characters, I decided to group demons and Kjerti as one group, and some obviously play a more significant role than others, but I'm gonna say something general about them, and then I'm going to mark spoilers where I go into a little bit more specifics, because I don't want to name the ones that end up being significant in the non-spoiler portion of the video. But one reason that I love the Kjerti is because of the obvious like natural balance that they have with nature and the like naturalness of them compared to the new religion, where men who live in cities worship the new religion, whereas the Kjerti have always been of nature and have been like household spirits in smaller forest villages and places where they still have power. So they're very much entwined with nature in that way, which I found really interesting and really liked about them. And so I loved learning about them, and I love how they demand respect, but they will give help to those who treat them well. And people in general think of them as demons, but they're not. They really just serve their function, and they exist as they are. They're not evil, they just are the way that they are because they are of nature, and they are like the old spirits of Russian folklore. So I thought that that was really interesting, is the kind of the reality versus the public perception of the Kjerti. And so I am going to go into brief spoilers now for the entire series, because I want to talk about Morozko and Medved, and I don't know if I'm saying those right, but I loved the like relationship and evolution of the two of them throughout the entire series, because until the latter half of Winter of the Witch, it just seems like an obvious course of action to want to cage the bear, because he is like a chaotic demon. He is very obviously taking actions that are detrimental to people. He is corrupting Constantine and getting him to act against Vazia, and just really to like manipulate and control the minds of the general public. But it does seem natural in the end that Morozko and Medved have to exist in balance in nature in order for like everything to be resolved, because Morozko is like, he's portrayed in a rather positive light throughout this series, and I'm not complaining about that because I really like him and his relationship with Vazia. I think that that part is very interesting, and I enjoy their dynamic. But he still is like the Winter King and the demon of death. So it seems very natural, after all is said and done, that you need to have life and death in balance with each other, and both of them need to be free, and they need to be able to work together. And as long as the Kjerti can be saved, and this old pagan religion and like Russian folklore, all the stuff that's involved in that can then thrive again, that things are only going to be doing well if all of it is in balance. So I was really happy with the resolution of that. Okay, coming back to non-spoilers, I would like to talk about the plot, and of course I am going to be vague in this as well. And so one thing that I already said is that each book is so different and yet so good in its own ways, which is what I love. Books 2 and 3 are definitely faster paced than book 1, but all of them were compelling, so I never really felt that it was too slow, but without a doubt the plot itself does pick up in books 2 and 3 compared to book 1. And Katherine Arden manages to give her plots complexity while also like not making the books long and still maintaining that the plots are very easy to follow. So she did a really, really good job of crafting that. And I liked that even while she had these plots playing out, Vasia's story and her emotional journey and her growth were still the central thread. So it was really well done in that sense, because Katherine Arden recognized what the strength was and what she should be focusing on, and that is what she focused on and what she did. The scope of the story and the stakes are definitely raised from book to book, with The Bear and the Nightingale feeling the smallest and the most personal, and The Winter of the Witch spans a much larger scope, but it still manages to have a small enough focus that you can emotionally invest in the plot that you're following, and you're still following the characters that you've come to love while knowing that there are wider implications and knowing that the stakes are higher. And I think the final thing that I want to say is that one really positive thing is that there are real stakes. So like, Katherine Arden is not overdoing it on the emotional trauma, but she's also not afraid to go there. Like Vasia does, and the other characters, like, they go through things in these books, and the stakes are there, and there are like triumphant moments, and there are sad emotional moments, and moments that like can be hard to read, but overall it feels appropriate to the story. And to be honest, I thought that these could easily be adult novels. They're not gratuitous and they're not grimdark and like none of that, but she's really not afraid to explore the themes that she is exploring, and I thought that she did just a phenomenal job. So I don't know what else to say aside from the fact that I really want everyone to read these, and it is a trilogy and the books are pretty short. Like, if there is a series that it's easy for me to recommend, it's this one. I'm just going to keep singing its praises and trying to get people to read it that I think will enjoy it, because I do just think that it is so, so good. So I think that that's all that I have to say. I hope that this was a reasonable length. I don't know how long I've been talking for, but I'm so happy to say that I definitely have a new favorite series on my list. And I would love if you would leave me a comment and let me know what you thought of this series, and to chat with me about my thoughts. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please like if you liked it, subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. I post new videos every Monday and Thursday, and information about how to contact me and my joint Discord channel is in my description, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!